You know, folks, people often ask me, how did you survive the night shift for nearly 9 years and not get burnt out? 2 words, power pollen. I've been endorsing this product, can you believe it, since the 2000 Olympics. And I'm really proud to be a power pollen ambassador. Why? It works. Nature Bees Power Pollen. You know, it's not just another energy boost. It's your 24/7 vitality secret. Clinically proven to fuel your body and your mind. And I'm telling you now, it delivers. Sustained energy, deep sleep, laser focus, better gut health, boosted immunity, and even better hair, skin and nails. And now, staying on top of your health is easier than ever with the exclusive Power Pollen podcast offer. For just $160, you get a 6-month supply of Power Pollen, and Power Pollen will throw in an extra month for free. That's 7 months. Plus, you'll receive 2 bars of the beautiful pollen and honey soap with your order. Ready to feel your best? Head to powerpollen.com.au and follow the links in the description. Power Pollen. It's energy all day, every day. Thanks to Nature Bee for making this episode of Bonafide possible.
In a world where voices are silenced,
Please.
one man refuses to lie down.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
He's been punted not once,
40 years they've been trying.
not twice,
You couldn't fire somebody if they were horrible, doing a terrible job.
but 3 times.
You're fired.
He doesn't tell you what to think, but gives you something to think about. Welcome to the Bonafide Podcast with Luke Boner. And he's not
All right, here we go.
done
Hold your ears, folks.
yet.
It's showtime.
Well, g'day and welcome to the Anzac version of Bonafide with Luke Boner, episode 12 today. A little bit later on this Anzac Day, we'll talk to the president of my charity, Wounded Heroes, Martin Shaw, will join us with some compelling stories about this amazing charity and the people that it helps. We'll talk to Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki. First time on my podcast. I've spoken to him many times over the years about science and his new book. It's called A Periodic Tale, my sciencey memoir. He's a character, and I can't wait to catch up with Dr. Karl and the Man Cave with the Vice Captain, Adam McDonald, also just around the corner. And I also want to thank the folk at 2GB for having me do the drive program this week. It was a short week, but it was a lot of fun to be back in my old stomping ground there at Piermont. I want to say g'day to Ben and Hannah and the amazing Emily Watkins who put Clinton Maynard's show together. Clinton, you have a sensational staff. You're very, very lucky. To those 3 people, thank you so much for looking after me. But first up, let's go to the Vice Captain and hear what he's got to say on the Man Cave on this Anzac Bonafide.
Stop listening to the AM dial, to the boring AM shows. Sick and tired of counting sheep, but they're talking that never flows. And stop apologizing for the things you've never done. Time is short, life at night. Oh, it's up to us to do a show called The Man Cave. Yeah, to a show with Adam. Thomas holds the Man Cave line. Toby Ann is a real stunt girl.
Well, a very special g'day to you all. Here we are, Bonafide with Luke Boner, and this particular episode is landing right on Anzac Day. For me, the most important day of the year. Yes, I know I'll upset a lot of people who will think Christmas Day is more important, Easter Sunday is more important. That's the Christian society. But Anzac Day is non-denominational. Anzac Day, to me, is more important than the divisive Australia Day. It's a day when all Australians can get together from all walks of life and It's a chance to say thank you to those who have sacrificed so much in order to deliver us the best country in the world. They're my thoughts. We're going to say good day to the vice captain, Adam McDonald.
Here he is.
We're going to have a bit of fun on this episode of the Man Cave, but let's kick off with Anzac Day.
Yeah.
You come from an army background, and we've talked about this.
I do.
And it's a special day to you too. Is Anzac Day more important to you than Australia Day or Christmas Day or Easter Sunday or any of the other?
I think there's a country mile between a lot of them. Like you touched on, Luke, the other ones are sort of all religion based, and I'm not a religious guy, but Anzac Day is a day to commemorate why we're here and what we have. Well, how we can live our lives because of these men and women who have gone before us, fought for us, for the country. So it is a very special day. Wonder Boy's 17 this year. He's never missed an Anzac Day. I was speaking to him about it last night, and I said, "You know what tomorrow is?" He said, "Yeah, it's Anzac Day, and I'm keen for the dawn service." It's just one of those things in our family. That's what you do. You go and pay your respects, and then you go out and enjoy the day for what these people have left us. So very, very important. All those other ones, the religious ones, they're hallmark to me. They don't mean anything.
Is Anzac Day to you more important significantly than Australia Day, our national day? Because I think Anzac Day is our national day.
Yeah, I totally agree, Luke. Australia Day is sort of lost its way. It's sort of become, there's no real meaning behind it anymore. People love the day off. You get on the cans with your mates. Australia Day's lost, and I think Anzac Day is a real day to remember things and to really appreciate what we have in this country. And we are a very lucky country, the way we live our lives. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but man, we're streets ahead of some of the places on earth. And I think it's just a good day to reflect and actually have a bit of heart and a bit of meaning behind something. That these days it's all bells and whistles and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that, which is all instant. But Anzac Day is a real day to sit back and just reflect on what we have and what these people have left us going before us.
All right, well, here's a question for you then, Vice Captain. There was an RSL club in the news 2 weeks ago that wanted to ban 2-Up. They said the dawn service is great, the camaraderie is good, get together with your mates, have a couple of beers, but they believe that 2-Up cheapens the day and Anzac Day should not be about gambling. Thoughts?
I don't think so. I think it's all part of the day. It's not as if we're just going out to play 2-Up. Most of the people who get to go to 2-Up will be going to the dawn service first. They go and have a feed and then go and have a couple of games of flipping the coin. I don't think it cheapens it. I think it's part of the part of the fabric of the fibre, and I'm all for it. I'll guarantee you I'll be down at Walsh's tomorrow arvo, and I'll be tailing them up, no problem.
I'd like to get some feedback. Luke Boner Radio Guy at gmail.com. Does 2-Up belong on Anzac Day? Does it cheapen it? Does it make it more about getting really pissed and gambling? Or is it part of the Anzac Day tradition? Interesting story here, Vice Captain.
Yeah.
There was a survey. Now, look, it was only of 1,118 Australians. It was conducted by News Corp's Growth Intelligence Centre, whatever that is. But it was a survey. Adam, 42% of respondents said they felt strongly connected to Anzac Day. 42. But the figure drops down to 23% for Gen Z Australians. Now, they're Australians aged 13 to 28. 1 in 3 members of Gen Z said they respect the day, but they don't feel personally connected to it. But listen to this, another 29% said they don't even think about it. Okay, that's 13 to 28-year-olds, Gen Z.
Yeah.
What do you put this down to? I talked about it when I was on 2GB during the week, and I had a lot of callers telling me that there is a possibility. I don't know more about the sample that they took, but callers were telling me that maybe some of these younger Australians are from migration families, immigrants, who, unlike us, weren't born and bred here for a few generations, and they are completely misguided or uneducated about what Anzac Day is about, and that hasn't followed on to their children like it has with you and me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a legitimate reason. It was just the thoughts of some of my callers on 2GB last week.
Well, I've got a couple of issues here. These surveys. I've never been asked about one of these surveys. Where do they find these people to do the survey? Number one, I don't, you know, they've probably got a pool of people who are survey savvy and they ask the same people all the time. So I can't take it as gospel. I think they could be a bit biased. And the other thing is with that generation, they haven't seen war firsthand within living memory. Like I have it because my father was at Vietnam, so I got it. I saw him. I had him when he came back. You've seen it through your grandfather and other family members who you know have actively served, and you've seen them go away and come back. But these Gen Zs, they've never seen anything like that. And you know that men and women actually go off to hand combat and fight for a better cause or fight for whatever, even if it's a worse cause. But they've never seen people leave our shores to go off in droves. I mean, Afghanistan and sort of conflicts like that, yes, but these Gen Zs they're so wrapped up in cotton wool, they don't understand. And I'm sure if they saw it firsthand, that you would change their minds. But I just think we're just raising puffballs, to be honest. Like it's puffballs. I just really think it's a sad thing that these kids don't get the gravity of what men and women have done before them.
But there's another part to this that I found interesting, Adam. The respondents were also given the option of saying maybe, in inverted commas, they would consider fighting depending on the context of the situation. And it was here that Gen Z pulled away from the other generations. If a war was imminent, a total of 68% of Gen Z said that they would consider fighting for Australia, but only if we were invaded. And I think a lot of Australians feel now cautious about going to another country and fighting a political war.
Of course.
And Vietnam was one of those wars, wasn't it?
Absolutely it was. And that's the crux of the matter is what you've got to decide is if it's coming here, lace your boots up, let's get ready to go. But you've got to be cautious about going to a foreign land and fighting for someone else's war and someone else's issue and someone else's political agenda. And I guess that's kind of a good thing with that generation is they say, you know, if there's long ships coming into Sydney Harbour, we're involved. But other than that, we're a bit cautious and rather stay at home, which I'm totally down with. I wouldn't send Wonderboy overseas to fight, but I'll guarantee if he came here, he'd be the first one to put his hand up.
So would conscription work today? I don't think it would.
No.
You look at conscription during Vietnam, and if your birthday fell on the wrong day, on the wrong month, you were sent packing to Vietnam to fight in the war you probably knew nothing about. Or, I don't know. But and if you didn't go, you were sent to jail, Adam.
Yeah.
You were sent to jail. And I'm reminded of Australia's first conscientious objector, and that was Simon Townsend from Simon Townsend's Wonderworld. He was Australia's first conscientious objector. He said, I'm not going to Vietnam, and he actually went to jail.
How long did he go for?
He served a 1-month prison sentence in Long Bay.
That's a hard place to do it.
He also spent a month in military prison in solitary confinement with bread and water.
Man.
He was jailed in 1967, and then guess what? He was jailed again in 1968. Simon Townsend.
Man, we were cruel back then, weren't we? We were really cruel. It's unbelievable. But, I mean, 2 months in the lockup compared to 6 months overseas on a tour shooting at people and getting shot at, it's, I don't know, you'd probably take the former rather than the latter, wouldn't you?
What are your thoughts? Please let us know. We love hearing your opinions and your reaction. Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. But he actually was prepared to go to jail. Now, I don't think conscription would work anymore. If you were prepared to go to jail rather than go overseas and fight in a country for a war you didn't understand, we don't have enough jail cells to fill everyone.
No, and I think they had to do conscription for the Vietnam War because the first two world wars, the way they advertised it, It was like an adventure. See the world. Come with us. Go with your mates. And they touted it as a jaunt, as a journey, as a trip, as a bloody holiday. And all these young men signed up going, yes, I'm going to go and see Egypt. Yes, I'm going to go and see Africa. Yes, I'd love to see the world. Little in the fine print, but you're going to be given an SLR and a bayonet and you've got to fight for us. And once all that went through and everyone realised that it's no cakewalk over there, it was absolutely fucking horrific. That's why they had to do conscription, because no one wanted to go. It's not our war.
Interesting, they did a similar survey on young kids from Ukraine who said that they would never go to war, but since the Russian invasion, a huge percentage of young Ukrainian kids have said, yes, I'll pick up a gun and defend my country.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of got no choice. You see tanks rolling down the main street of your town, you've kind of got no choice. But, where we are, we're, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and in the sunshine, it's a much different story.
But just remember World War II and France rolled over. Now, there was the French resistance. There were people who fought against the Germans from an underground capacity.
Yep.
But France surrendered. I guess that they probably didn't have much choice.
No, they wouldn't have. They weren't much of a superpower, were they?
No. Interesting, when France surrendered, the English sank their naval force, sank every boat in the French Navy because they knew the Germans would get control of them.
Yeah, and they didn't want them to have them.
That's right, and they sunk them. Anyway, it's a very important day. What will be interesting later today, because as I said, this podcast drops midnight on Anzac Day, the weather along the East Coast looks like being dreadful. It'll be interesting to see the effect on the crowd, those people who are staunch dawn service and marching enthusiasts. It'll be interesting to see if they still turn up in the crook weather that's expected later today, Adam.
It's true. We've got sunny weather. We've got sunny skies down here, so we'll be fine down in the nation's capital. I don't know what you're doing on the East Coast, but we'll be fine. It'll be bitterly cold.
East Coast torrential rain is forecast, so we'll have to wait and see. During the week, I talked a bit about Macquarie University, and they have backflipped on their rules on acknowledgement of country. I don't like acknowledgement of country. It's not a real traditional Indigenous ceremony. Some countries did it back when Australia was divided into nearly 300 countries. Some didn't. Ernie Dingo and a colleague came up with it many, many years ago, and I just don't like being introduced to my own country. I'll get to your opinion in just a second. I asked our listeners on our Facebook page what they thought. David said, Luke, with much respect to you as an Indigenous Australian, I'm in the outback at the moment on placement, and the acknowledgement of country, the ACCHS, is in shambles, and the sad part, no one knows of its existence yet. Indigenous peoples will not participate in their own organisation and management. We don't need political grandstanding. We need action. I agree.
Yep.
Simon said, Lauren Barry got hammered last year when she suggested on the Sheargold show, welcome to country at the start of every Pilates class was a bit much. I would suggest if it doesn't proceed to the national anthem, it isn't necessary. Darren said, time to drop it and come up with something more uniting than divisive. What are your thoughts on welcome to country?
Look, I think it's an important thing to recognise, but I think that's just, they're getting thrown out at the opening of a letter. It's just becoming, let's just do it every moment we get, every chance we get, and it's just getting flogged like a dead horse. I think it's too much. If it's an important ceremony, if it's a big occasion, sure, I'm more than happy to be welcome to your country, but it's just getting flogged. It happens everywhere, and it's just been overdone. And when you overdo something like that, it's just going to totally lose its meaning.
Adam McDonald is with me. It is the Man Cave, where we talk about stuff that's on our minds, topics that have been in the news during the week. Just while we're on the behaviour of young people, Adam, can't wait for your response to this story. And we've put the photos on our Facebook page, Luke Boner, that radio guy. School holidays. Have you ever been to the movies, Adam, during school holidays. I took my kids to see, I forget, Monster Inc. It might have been.
Yeah.
And it was at a Hoyt's cinema at the Westfield down the road here, the Warringah Mall. I have never seen so many disruptive, bad-mannered kids in my life. And you know why? Because the parents dropped them off and then the parents went shopping. I was probably the only parent sitting with my two kids in that cinema that day. I actually got up out of my seat and I went halfway up the cinema and I said, "Shut up."
You're that guy.
We have paid money to come and see this movie and you are ruining it for me and my family. And if you don't shut up, I will turf you out personally. And I got applauded on my way back. And of course, my daughter Holly goes, "Oh, how embarrassing. Oh, embarrassing." But I got up and said something. So anyway, the Minecraft movie, I don't know nothing about it. But the photos, the images were just unbelievable. It was a social media post complaining about the behavior of kids during a screening of a Minecraft movie. The vandalism and the destruction left behind when the movie was over. Please go and have a look at our Facebook, Luke Boner, that radio guy. Some people online said, "Oh, look, boys will be boys." It's a kids' movie. They're just having fun. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I thought it was absolutely disgraceful. It looked like a war zone. Popcorn, even drinks thrown. Unbelievable. Have a look at the photos on our Facebook page, folks. Luke Boner, that radio guy. Is it okay for parents to bring a Tarago load of kids to a movie cinema in a shopping centre while on school holidays, and then for the parents to disappear and do their shopping and let the cinema be their babysitter for a while? Or why do these kids have no respect for other people's property? It was unbelievable. What are your thoughts?
That's what it is. It's no respect. I mean, I've been guilty of it, dropping Wonder Boy and his cronies off at the movies and say, "I'll be back in a couple of hours. I'll meet you in the food court." What happened in there stays in there, I guess. I don't know what happened, but it is all about respect. But I mean, you put all these kids in the one room. It's like bloody Lord of the Flies. Like, they lose their minds. They're whopped up on Coca-Cola and sugary lollies, and they're trying to sit still in a chair, and they just lose their mind. And one kid throws a Jaffa at someone, and then it's on for young and old. It's I don't know. I don't have an issue with it. You know, as long as you're not destructive and tearing up seats and stuff. A bit of spilt popcorn, whatever. I don't mind.
It was a mess. It was absolutely a war zone. Adam, at our local cinema, which hasn't improved much in 50 years, the Collaroy movie cinema. We call it the cinema that time forgot. Back in our day, it had an upstairs and a downstairs, and the downstairs had a wooden floor. I promise you I didn't do this only because I was greedy. But people used to roll. Remember the old saying, "Roll your Jaffas down the aisle"? Because they made a noise. I didn't do it because I wasn't about to waste Jaffas. But we did that back in our day. We rolled Jaffas down the aisle.
Sure. I mean, it's all fun and games. It's not. I don't think it's in the end of the world. Let the kids be kids. Like they've been locked up at home with mum and dad. They're all of a sudden they've got their crew out. They're in public in a darkened room. Sugar rush to the tenfold. Whatever shit's going to hit the fan.
And no parental supervision.
That's right. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to get the usher with his little torch and say, "Can you please stop that?" in his little uniform and fez. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, look, back in our day, we did have the ushers and the usherettes, and they were like the clipboard Nazis at netball.
Yeah.
They were unbelievable. They had uniforms and they had the pen light torch, and they ruled the cinemas. You were, because otherwise they would kick you out. Do we bring back the usherettes? But the usherettes, they're only 13 and 14 anyway.
Exactly right. Just because you've got a torch doesn't make you in charge. But that's when you had, like, when you'd buy...
Give them a taser.
That'll work.
I reckon the usherettes at the movie cinemas should have tasers.
But back in those days, you bought your seats and you had to sit in your assigned seat, and the usher would walk
yeah.
you up into your seat. Now it's just first in, best dressed. I remember one of the first memories of me going to the movies. I can't remember for the life of me what we were watching, but it was me and my sister. Mum and Dad did it exactly that. They dropped us off, and the cinema wasn't very packed, but I remember there was these two teenagers. They probably would have been 15, 16. They were sitting right in the back row. They were smoking durries. Like they were living their lives. Like they were living their best lives. And I remember sitting there thinking, you two are the naughtiest kids in the world. Like I couldn't, because my father was quite a disciplinarian, you know, you fuck around, you find out. So we sat there, we had our choc tops, we had our Fantas, whatever, and we sat there quietly and watched the movie. But these two knuckleheads up the back, they were laughing and shouting. And I remember walking past where they sat, and there's all cigarette butts out everywhere. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
Well, guess what? People vape in movies all the time now because it doesn't smell like cigarette smoke. Vaping in the movie cinema is the latest thing. It goes on all the time.
I'm sure it does.
What's your observation of being in the movies that just drives you mad? Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. Please, and I tell you what, I'd love to see some photos because you can take a photo with flash. Oh no, don't take your phone. Don't take your phone out in the movie cinema. Don't do that. Sorry, cancel that. Cancel that. But I'd love to know your experience of being in a movie. Bad behaviour in the movie cinema. What's the worst thing you've ever seen? I'd love to hear from ushers and usherettes. What have you ever kicked anybody out of a movie? Have you ever been like me, a parent that's got up and said something? Luke Boner, that radio guy at gmail.com. We got some feedback after we placed the photo on the Facebook page. This is what our listeners had to say. Jeff said, simple solution, stop showing the movie and put signs up saying why. The cost to clean up the mess far outweighs the losses of not showing the movie at all. It's a bit outrageous. Robert said, as a cinema owner, I wouldn't show it. You'd lose money on the time it would take to clean up. Wow.
Well,
a cinema owner said he wouldn't show that movie.
I think the cinema, the whole cinema experience is dying anyway. The last time I went to the movies was a couple of months ago, and I saw a movie called, I think it was called Hollow Legs or Happy Legs.
Right.
Fucking terrible movie. But anyway, I was on a date, and it was on a Tuesday night, which is tight ass Tuesday, which is half price because I was paying, so that's why we went Tuesday. And there was like 4 people in there. The place was barren. Like it was. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it's tight ass Tuesday. Back in my day, that you'd be jockeying for position to get on a tight ass Tuesday because it was so cheap. You'd go to all you can eat Pizza Hut, and then you'd go to the Tuesday movies, and that was the
in the city.
That's right.
In the city.
That's right. And that's or you go Pancakes on the Rocks, or one of those big conglomerates.
There's actually Pancakes at the movies. It's now a KFC.
Yeah, right. So that's what we did. But I couldn't believe there was literally 4 other people in the movie cinema. I can't understand how they'd make any money on that.
Maybe they're not making movies for the big screen anymore, or maybe everybody knows it'll be streamed soon, and people have got widescreen TVs and great sound systems in their lounge room, and they're going to wait.
Yeah. So the only time you'd go to the movies is to watch a big action blockbuster. That's the only time. You wouldn't go to watch a rom-com or maybe a horror, but a comedy or something like that. You wouldn't bother. Like you've got your home theatre system at home, and it's going to be. You're exactly right. There's more money going into making movies direct for Netflix than there is to go the big blockbuster into the cinema.
Vice Captain Nadia has written in, says, I took my grandchildren. They were 8 and 4 years of age, and they were way better behaved than that to see the movie. I'm trying to understand why this behaviour happened at this particular movie theatre. It cost us $114 for 4 movie tickets, popcorn, medium size, 4 drinks, fairy floss, $114 to go to the movies.
Yeah. I mean, everything's expensive these days. I went down the South Coast for the Easter break, and we went to one of those indoor putt-putt joints that's around.
Yeah.
4 of us, 19 holes. It was $140. Like that took us an hour. So it's a lot of money to be splashing around.
And choc tops. How much are choc tops now? Anyway, Nadia finishes up by saying, obviously these children or young adults haven't worked hard for this money.
That's right.
I would lock the doors of the movie theater and make them clean it up and explain to their parents if they want to collect their children, they're going to come and help their kids clean up.
But you've got to feel for the parents, you know. They've had 3 kids home from school on school holidays. They're underfoot. They're tearing up the house. Chuck them in the movie cinema. That's an hour and a half grace you've got to go and have a coffee, maybe get some groceries done without your shithead kids hanging around. I don't know.
Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. Before I talk to you about your sale item of the week, which is a ripper.
It is.
We got a message from Roger. Hello, Luke, and all the man cave. My name is Roger. I was wondering if Adam could tell me the value of my granddad's watch.
Oh, yes, the Longines.
It's a 1963 Longines, and my dad passed it on to me when he died last year, sadly. My dad changed the wristband, and I don't have the original one, but the watch itself is in good working condition. There are no scratches on the face. Thank you for the great show. Can't wait to listen to the next episode. I listen as I walk the dog in the morning. Good on you, Roger. A picture of that watch is on our Facebook page. It is a Longines. Adam, tell us about Longines watches and what you think Roger's watch is worth.
The Longines brand is an iconic brand in both ladies and gents watches. They're a really sleek design, very minimalist, but very high quality. The Longines name its reputation is quality, quality, quality. These Sports Chief watches, which is the one that Roger's got, is not the sort of the high echelon of the Longines branding. It's more of what you call an everyday, your everyday Longines. It's not your high end. So if I was to sell Roger's watch, there's a couple of factors. Without the original band, it's going to take a bit of price off. I'd be probably asking for $1,500. Maybe a little more, and let people talk you down. But that's a sort of market. There is a huge collectible market for vintage watches, but this Longines, it's like your everyday vintage watch. It's not your high end one.
I've got a story for you. My Uncle Ron, you remember Uncle Ron from Launceston who passed away last year?
Yes.
He gave me a Longines watch for my 21st, and I never wore it. I might have worn it once, but I had the original box and I put it back in there, back of the sock drawer, and I'd forgotten all about it. And it's moved with me all these years, but I never wore it. My daughter, Holly, discovered it. What she was doing in my sock drawer, I have no idea. But she said, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, Uncle Ron gave me that years ago." She said, "Can I have it?" I said, "Oh, okay. Why not? Why not? It doesn't work. I've tried to wind it. Doesn't work." She said, "I'll go and get a battery, or I'll take it to get fixed." She couldn't wait to tell my son, right, her brother, and anyone else that would listen, that she got it fixed and got it valued 10 large. What? Uncle Ron.
Yeah. See, there
I
are
said,
some.
she said, "Do you want it back now?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Too bad."
I think with that sort of era of watches, it's like, if you work for a company for 30 years, you get your gold watch. And that's the sort of watches that they would give. They would give these really high-end watches instead of a cash bonus or an overseas trip. They'd give you something that you can take home and you can cherish, which was obviously the gold watch.
Can you explain this to me, just while we're on watches? Why are Rolex watches considered to be they'd be one of the top three? Yeah. Is a Rolex overrated? Is it bullshit? Or why are they so revered, Adam? Why are Rolex watches considered to be the watch you must have?
I think that with the Rolex branding, with these watches, you can only stand by your product. And Rolex are absolutely clinical in the production of their watches. They don't produce thousands and thousands of them. They go slowly. The instrumentation they use to produce the moving parts inside it are all numbered. They've all got serial numbers. You can trace it back to the exact date when it was manufactured. And it's just that whole... It's just the quality. Like you can't charge for a watch of that price if your watch doesn't stand behind the money. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't say, well, this watch is worth $20,000 and produce a shit watch. They're great watches. They're precision. They're beautifully made. I'd say half the price you are buying the name Rolex, because you've got the other big brands like Philippe Patek and Tag Heuer to a certain extent, but But if you talk watches, if you ask anyone what's a high-end watch, they're going to say Rolex first. And it's because they're so well made. There's no mystery behind the hype. It is what it is. They do attract the money because they are worth that coin.
I don't watch it, but the Minister for War and Finance loves Antique Roadshow, right? And she was,
Yep.
you probably love it, Adam. And there was
Love it.
an American Antique Roadshow episode, and there was a bloke, he looked just like a Vietnam vet, and it turns out he was. He was an ex-soldier. He had the beard, and he was still wearing the camouflage gear. And back in 1974, he bought a Rolex watch for himself, and it was an Oyster Rolex watch.
Oh, yeah, Perpetual Oyster.
He bought
Yep.
it in 1974, and it was expensive back then. It was $345.97 back in 1974.
Yeah, right.
Guess how much he was told it was worth?
Oh,
Okay.
I have no idea.
Well, the
Could be
expert said his watch was worth $400,000 at auction, and the
Wow.
bloke topples to the ground. But the appraiser wasn't finished. But because of the watch's pristine condition, it had the receipt, it had the warranty, which was not signed, so it had an unsigned warranty. It had the original
Yeah.
box, had never, ever been worn. In fact, the sticker on the back of the watch, which would be the first thing to rub off, was still there.
Yeah.
It was in absolutely pristine condition. The expert on Roadshow had never seen anything like it, and guess how much it was worth? $700,000.
Wow, way. I mean, who is going to put $700,000 on their wrist? I mean, I'm all for luxury goods, but I don't get it. You know, it's a fucking watch. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. If your watch works, like what I've got a watch at home, and I've got one of those, those 1980s Casio digital watches with the calculator on top.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? That's my speed. It works. It's. I mean, I get the how beautiful the watch is and the history behind it, but $700,000 on your wrist I think it's a bit of a wank.
What watch have you got? Show us a photo. Send it to us. Luke Boner, radioguy@gmail.com. Here is a story for you, Adam. You love a conspiracy theory.
Absolutely.
I've got a message here from Rebecca. Hi, Luke. I wonder if many people out there have a parent or a relative or a friend who are obsessed with conspiracy theories. During COVID, my mum became a conspiracy theorist. And at first I thought, okay, she has some valid points until she started talking about clones and everyone's tax being returned to them. And the Quanon, whatever that is. What's that?
Any of you incels, QAnon, 4chan.
Got no idea.
From that period, she has lost many friends and started becoming more and more erratic with her conversations. I tried to talk to her about it and she didn't want to hear it. So I had to step back from her for a while. Today, she is still right into it and has her car all sign written with conspiracy quotes and symbols. I just wondered whether many people were dealing with the same situation. It feels like I've lost my mum to conspiracies. She's not the same person.
It's quite easy to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. Like once you start looking into things, you read one and then it links you to another. It can be quite, it can be quite a rabbit hole. You just got to remember to pull yourself out of it, I guess.
Dr. Karl makes an appearance on this podcast a little bit later on, and we'll touch on conspiracies. Yeah. In fact, you and Dr. Karl on my national radio program once had a debate about the moon landing because you are convinced, I don't know if you still are, you were convinced that the whole moon landing was a conspiracy done in a Hollywood studio. And you've been telling me this for years, right? And I said, okay, well, why don't you have a debate with Dr. Karl? Tell the folks how that went.
Not very well for me. Let's be honest. He basically tore me a new ass. But I still can't believe that we've not gone back for any length of time. I can't believe that the computer power we got there with the Americans the computers are not even as powerful as my fucking iPhone that I keep in my pocket. And I can't believe we still haven't gone back, regardless of whatever for. Just go back to get a selfie, whatever. I just don't understand why we haven't gone back
It's a very expensive selfie, but I found something out recently that also rips you another one. There was a satellite, and I believe, yes, it was a US satellite, but the pictures coming back from it were intercepted all around the world, Adam. And the satellite went close enough to the moon to be able to take photos of the lunar surface. And there, in clear sight, was the landing site of Apollo 11, the tracks in the dust of the vehicles, the footsteps, the flag. That satellite's photos were intercepted by everybody around the world, and the landing site's there.
Was the MTV flag there too?
I think the Aboriginal flag was there.
Yeah, speaking of conspiracy theories, I was just speaking to my colleague about this morning. The Bermuda Triangle, is that still a thing? Because I remember when I grew up, I was absolutely petrified. You're like, you can't go there. You just can't go there. Is it still a thing?
I don't know, it might be a hexagon now. I'm not sure. But yes, no one went anywhere near the Bermuda Triangle because things disappeared. You didn't sail through it. You didn't fly over it. That's right.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's still a thing. Like, I don't know. It's not doing much for tourism Bermuda, is it?
I've just thought of a great promotion. I'm an ideas man. You ready?
Go.
Well, it'll take a bit of contra. But I reckon we should have a competition where we fly a lucky couple over the Bermuda Triangle in a Boeing 747 on Friday the 13th.
And what's the prize?
Oh, they won't collect it.
Landing it somewhere.
They won't be able to collect it. I'm an ideas man, Adam.
You certainly are.
I'm an ideas man. Tell us about your this car that you've got for sale. This is an absolute ripper.
Yeah, so this car that we've got a 2017 Holden VF2 Commodore SSV Redline 4-door sedan. Now it's a V8 6.2 litre. Now this is a very special car because this is the last of the manual X Chasers, the last of the police issued vehicles that were manual. So it's got the original number plates. It's been in Street Machine. It's known as bronze. So what happened was the young constable that was driving it, and it was his everyday patrol car. He bought it back off the police auction. So this is a very special car. This car still has the attachments for the breathalyzer and all those sort of components, the mounting for where the police lights were. All he's done is take the police decals off it. And it's a huge 6.2 litre V8 manual. It's got all the history behind it. It's a very, very rare car. The last of the manual X Chasers.
What do you think it'll go for?
80, 90. But see, I had that Valiant, the Charger here the other week.
How did it go?
I said you wouldn't get much change out of 40. It got $50,050.
Yeah, I thought more than 40.
So the early muscle cars are making a real comeback. I've just come across an estate up at Cessnock that has another Charger. So we're very excited. The car market's going really well for us down here. So just get on to carbids.com.au and have a look. Everything there is listed and listed well.
Adam, do you remember me telling you about the Anzac Day we had here in our street when COVID was on and we couldn't go to a dawn service? So we had our own at the end of our driveway.
Yep.
And we sent out an invitation to all the neighbours. And we said, bring a candle and I said, Nikki, we'll play the last post and we'll just have a solemn moment at the end of our driveways. We won't let COVID beat Anzac Day. And I took a photo of Nikki when she was finished. So this is right on dawn. Well, we found the photo. And there is the photo of Nikki standing there with her bugle. I think it might have been a cornet that day. You'll see in the photo the black and white picture of my pop, James Rupert Reed, in his uniform, and the candle in front of it. And it's a wonderful photo. I was so proud of her. It was really an emotional morning because the whole street turned up. We had no idea who was going to turn up. The whole street did. And the whole cul-de-sac was a river of candles. It was a wonderful day. So if you've heard that story, go to our Facebook page and you'll see the photo of Nikki on that Anzac Day during COVID.
You'd be surprised how many people did that sort of thing during COVID, Luke. Like I've mentioned that tale to a couple of people and they said, yeah, we did the same where I was just with a dear old friend of mine, Kay, over the long weekend. She came down to have the holiday with us, and she did the same during COVID. She put the word out to the neighbours, and they all went out because one of her neighbours' kids played one of the horns, and they got and he did it for Anzac Day as well. So it wasn't a rare thing. I think it's a beautiful thing to do though, of community minded. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, that was listener Adam who found the photo of our Minister for War and Finance, Nikki, on Anzac Day. I have been looking for it, but a listener found it. So, Adam, thank you so much. To everybody, if you're listening to this on Anzac Day, have a great day, a solemn day, a day of remembrance, and then let your hair down, Adam.
Yeah. Thank you.
Coming up, some fun with science with my good friend, Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki. Folks, when I was doing the night shift on the Triple M network, one of the really lucky things I was able to do was talk regularly with a bloke that's become a good mate. It's Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki. And he's written so many books, 48, I think, with 49 under the biro. And this one here, which I'm holding up now, is a cracker. And it's a story about Dr. Karl. It's called A Periodic Tale, My Sciencey Memoir. And when I first saw the cover, I watched it, I was looking at it from a little bit of a distance, and my eyes, I didn't have my glasses, and I thought it said My Scientology Memoir, and I got a bit worried about him. But no, it's a story of Dr. Karl, and it's fascinating. He came here, the only child of a Holocaust survivor, or Holocaust survivors, they fled to Australia in 1950. Karl has always forged his own destiny before he became one of the world's favourite scientific storytellers. He is a very good storyteller. He's done everything. He got his start as a physicist at the Port Kembla Steelworks. He promptly joined the steel industry's auto club. He raced modified rally cars on Wollongong's deserted back roads. He told me some time ago that he was even at one point described as a drug-crazed hippie. He made a living as a long-haired, dope-smoking taxi driver. He even applied to NASA as an astronaut in the 1980s, but he failed. But he's gone on to forge himself a wonderful career in the media because he is a great storyteller and he's a funny bloke, and there's not much he doesn't know about. Dr. Karl is the person you want to take with you to a trivia night, although it does take him a long time sometimes to give you the answer. And I think at most trivia nights, they have a stopwatch. So it gives me great pleasure to say, continuing our friendship, our relationship, and our fact-swapping conversations, Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki, welcome to Bonafide with Luke Boner.
Dr. Luke, Bonafide.
Do you like that?
Bonafide, fidelity, honesty, truth. So that's good truth. Is that the name of it?
That's right. That's right. You know, you remember back in the day when you couldn't get a drink on a Sunday, and the only way to get a drink was to drive from your locality to another locality, and you had to present your license to show that you were a bona fide traveller. You remember that?
Yeah, and so the only way you could drive on the roads on a Sunday was if you were drunk.
Exactly.
Goddamn bona fide. Okay, not quite. I've stretched the word. I would call that a bit of slight disinformation on my part, and I apologise for that.
Dr. Karl, it's taken a while for you to come on Bonafide because you were in Italy. Tell us why. This is a good story.
I spent a month on Lake Como, courtesy of the Rockefellers, in a 500-year-old villa. And if you've got a project, dear listener, you can apply for it as well. Look up Rockefeller Bellagio Residency, and you can apply for it. And I applied for it, and I had a month to work on the project of how to develop an AI, artificial intelligence chatbot agent that would go online and chat with people either by text or by voice and try to bring them out of the rabbit hole of disinformation or misinformation into which they had fallen and hopefully bring them back to the light. But the first one we're developing is specifically with regard to climate change. And so I spent a month there all day thinking about this and working on it and developing it.
Dr. Karl's also written a book called Dr. Karl's Little Book on Climate Change. Have a look at that. They're all there through ABC and at any good bookstores and some of the bad ones. Dr. Karl, you never cease to amaze me. I remember when AI when people first started, in fact, it was before people started talking about AI, you came on my radio program because you were playing with Chat GPT 40 and you demonstrated it on my radio program all those years ago. Look at it now.
It's a whole topic of itself, and we should talk about that another time.
Thank you for joining us here on the Bonafide, or Bonafide with Luke Boner, and the first of hopefully many chats. There's so much I want to talk to you about, but just quickly, a periodic tale, Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki. It's a great yarn. You've lived and are still living a fascinating life. How long did it take you to put this one together? Because a lot of your other books are a lot shorter. This is quite dynamic.
It took me 3 years because the main problem was I was very embarrassed about writing about myself. I'm very happy to say, hey, black holes have no size, and there are some trees that actually benefit from being hit by lightning, and we are getting closer to being able to understand life and how it arose out of a bunch of chemicals. That I'm happy to talk about, but to say, here's a story about me, give me some money, read it. By the way, it's written about me, by me, telling me how wonderful I am, see you later, bye. I feel a bit embarrassed about that.
No, but don't be embarrassed. Do not be embarrassed. It's a great yarn. I've got to talk to you about some things we have covered, but my new listeners may not know. One is you won a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering why belly button fluff was blue.
Not quite. It wasn't a Nobel Prize. It was an Ig Nobel Prize, which is given for research that cannot or should not be done. And it wasn't for peace. It was for the category of interdisciplinary research. So it's a sort of a send-up of the Nobel Prizes, something that makes you laugh and learn. And yes, I did in fact win it for my groundbreaking research into belly button fluff and why it's almost always blue. And as an example of something that makes you sort of stop and look or laugh and learn, there was an Ig Nobel Prize given for an estimation of the force required to drag sheep across various surfaces.
Yes.
And you're thinking, how can that possibly benefit anybody?
Yeah.
And it was actually to do with sheep shearers who have to work at an angle shearing the sheep and then have to take the sheep here and there. And if there's the surface that they're working on, the floor is slightly inclined, it makes it easy to drag the sheep here and there, and also it's not that bad for the sheep. I don't think it makes it worse for the sheep, and it makes it better for the humans. And so it was actually sort of like an occupational health paper, but it had a funny title.
See, you're changing the world. You're changing the world. But the other interesting, and it's a condition you have, and I'll get you to explain it, you don't recognise faces. Explain this.
No, they kind of look like bricks in a wall. Like there's this face and there's this brick, and they look the same. And I really came aware of it first when I was in first year medicine. As a mature age student, two of my fellow students who were younger than me came up to me and said, "Hi, Gay Carl." I said, "Hi." And they said, "What's my name?" This was in about the end of first week uni in a 5-year course, right, for medicine. And they said, "What's my name?" I said, "Oh, you're John." And I said, "What's the other guy?" And the other guy said, "What's my name?" I said, "Well, you're John too." And he said, "Don't you think it's weird that we both have the same name? Can't you pick the difference between us?" And as I looked, I could see that suddenly, while they were tall, young, slim Anglo males with red hair, one wore glasses and one didn't, and the one with glasses had a beard. And it sort of came to me, their faces sort of defuzzed. As it was like there was a cloud, and suddenly I could see the beard and the glasses.
So you don't recognise faces. It's like bricks in the wall. You know what? You would be a detective's nightmare if you were trying to pick someone out of a lineup.
I would be very bad as a detective. One thing I know about the detectives is that they're very good at recognising faces and usually names, and some of them, not all, have an ability to tell when people are lying.
Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki is with us here on Bonafide with Luke Boner, a man with a fascinating life. But I want to get to some current issues, if you can, because we'll do this from time to time on the podcast, and we'll get to know you better. So shall we go on to some interesting stuff?
Oh, hit me with a big one, baby.
Not that discovering why belly button fluff is blue isn't important, but we'll move on. When I've spoken to you in the past, and I hope I've got this correct, you've always said to me that our days and years living on planet Earth are at a limit, and that we're going to have to become a race that's able to travel through space, that one day, thousands, maybe millions of years down the track, I don't know, but one day we're going to have to be able to pack up and leave Earth. Is that pretty much how you feel?
We have to become a space-going race.
A space-going race, yeah.
Yeah, because we've got at the moment all of our eggs in one basket, which is that all the life that we know of in the entire universe at the moment is stuck on this planet, and therefore all the planet humans and their life support systems, the trees, etc., are stuck on this planet. We could get wiped out by a big rock. So back in 2015, the Halloween comet, or Halloween rock, which came past, I think, on the 31st of October, hence the name Halloween. It was 600 meters in diameter, and it missed the Earth by not much at all, just a bit further away than the moon. That's only, several very short period of time, like many seconds in its flight path. And if it had hit, it could have wiped out, depending on where it landed, up to 80% of humanity. And yet, if it had 3 years to do something about it, the human race would have done something about it. But in this case, we had only 3 weeks. And roughly half of all the Earth-crossing asteroids bigger than 600 metres have been discovered. At the rate we're discovering them and how it's gradually filtering down or dropping down, we know that we're roughly halfway through. If they're coming at us from the sun side of the orbit rather than from outer space side of the orbit, then the chances of seeing them are very, very small. So we have to become a space-going race. That means modifying humans, I reckon, rather than modifying the places that we go to.
So if we do have to go and live somewhere else, everyone's being focused on Mars at this point. Do you think it will be Mars, or do you think it will be somewhere a lot further away? And if it's answer B, are we going to have to develop a spacecraft that can take us somewhere at the speed of light, if not quicker? Is that possible?
Oh, so many things in one go. Okay, so firstly, with our current science, we can't go faster than the speed of light, and we can't even travel at the speed of light if we have mass. So a photon, a beam of light, travels at the speed of light, but it has no mass. Remember about 15 years ago, there was a big hullabaloo about the Large Hadron Collider and the Higgs boson and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And that's a big collider where they get beams of hydrogen ions and take them up to a very, very high percentage of the speed of light, like
They did this in
99.99.
Switzerland, didn't they?
Yeah, on the border of Switzerland
Yeah,
and
that's
France.
right.
It's an underground ring, and they got big magnets, and they use up a lot of electricity, and they slam these very high-speed beams of particles into each other, and then new particles are created, and they found in there, well, they were looking for a long time, the Higgs boson. Now, we're talking, you casually mentioned travelling at the speed of light, so this is dealing with that. The Higgs boson is the particle that gives you mass.
Right.
We know where your volume comes from because you've got a certain volume. If you go into a bathtub, it's full, water will flow over the edge. And we know where the volume comes from because you're made of atoms, and the atoms like to be a certain distance apart, not too far, not too close, and so they take up space. And we know where your colour comes from because light from a light bulb or the sun lands on you, and some of it's absorbed and some of it's reflected, and we pick that up with our eyes, blah, blah, blah. But your mass, that's a mystery, or was. Now we know where your mass comes from. The next stage is to add money and physics, and we can then get rid of mass. So Luke Boner could still have all of your other characteristics. Your heart would pump, your lungs would move, but you'd have no mass. And then we accelerate you to the speed of light, deliver you to Mars in about 10, 20 minutes, depending, and then give you your mass back again. Do we have any idea how to do that? No. But back in the late 1800s, when Becquerel, the scientist, put some uranium salts on a photographic plate that was covered in paper, and the uranium salts gave out a radiation that fogged that photographic plate, that discovery gave us all we have today. Like, being able to talk to somebody from one side of the world to the other on your phone and see their picture, and quantum mechanics and X-rays and computers, all of that came from that one single discovery. And we're now heading for another discovery which will give us the ability to travel at the speed of light. Have we had that discovery yet? No.
There must be a lot of pressure to be able to do this if we are only here temporarily, and that travelling at the speed of light is the only way we're going to be able to go to a distant galaxy.
Well, we want to go faster than the speed of light because
Faster.
So even just going to the nearest galaxy, the Andromeda Galaxy, which, by the way, is the furthest that you can see with the human eye. If anybody ever asks you how far can you see with the naked eye, the answer is 2.5 million light years. Because on a cloudless, moonless night, if you know where to look, you can see this fuzzy thing in the sky, and that's the Andromeda Galaxy, and it's 2.5 million light years away. And travelling at the speed of light will take you 2.5 million years to get there. So travelling at the speed of light is not good enough. We have to go faster. The breakthrough there, I reckon, that will let us travel faster than the speed of light is related to the fact that when the universe started up, there are a whole bunch of dimensions, 12, and 8 of them went away, and we don't know where they are. And if we can find those dimensions, we can jump into those dimensions maybe and then travel at faster than the speed of light and get to the other end. Let me demonstrate with a sheet of paper.
Yes, please.
I happen to have a sheet of paper here. Suppose I've got an X here.
Yeah.
And I want to travel to the other X over there.
Yes.
See the two X's?
Yes,
right?
I can.
I want to travel from one place to the other. Right. Now, normally the only way I can do it is by travelling across the paper. And that's in 2 dimensions. But if I can then bend the paper into the 3rd dimension, here I am bending it, kissing the 2 X's together, and then somebody at that X jumps out of their 2-dimensional sheet of paper into a 3rd dimension, then reappears. They jump out of here and they reappear over there. So they jump out of here and they reappear here because they're now kissing each other because we've bent space. That's how we could travel from here to there without covering the space in between.
So it's kind of like Star Trek, beam me up, beam me down, Scotty.
No, that is...
Oh,
hang
okay.
on. Yes, it is, because the trouble with the beam me up, beam me down is that you have to get rid of all of the atoms at one place and reconstruct them at the other place.
That's right, yeah.
But in this case, we're actually moving from here to there as a complete entity. We're not destroying the atoms. There is another way of going faster than the speed of light, which is called the Alcubierre effect, where you shrink the space in front of you. So if you imagine, for example, you're in, say, Sydney, and you want to go to Perth, there's a couple of thousand kilometres of space between you. But if you shrink the space in front of you down to 0.5 metre, then you can travel from Sydney to Perth in virtually no time at all. And it's called the Alcubierre effect. But once again, we've got to develop the physics to understand the missing dimensions. So these are things that the human race will still do if we keep on staying together as a coherent society.
But can I just say this? Things do happen quickly, relatively quickly. If you think of the fact that my grandfather saw the invention of the motor car and man walk on the moon in one lifetime. That was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Sure. Well, if you time it, say, from the Wright brothers having their first flight on the 17th of December 1903.
As the two brothers prepare to attempt the first catapulted takeoff, man's age-old dream of flight becomes a reality.
Then the 20th of July...
1969.
2, 1, 0. All engine running.
A person could see that in their lifetime from not being able to fly to go to the moon and back.
So anything's possible?
Within limits, we need to get the physics right. So in this case, the Becquerel started off an avalanche that led to something called computers being developed, so that with these very primitive computers, we could organise our navigation at very high speed to do all the calculations necessary to get us to the moon. Because if we didn't have computers, sure, we could do the calculations, but it would have taken much too long and we wouldn't have survived the journey.
Because to land precisely on the moon and the room of computers that they use, which are now all available on your mobile phone, I mean, and because the Earth is turning and going around the sun, the moon is orbiting as well. And to get that timing right, the trajectory right, and to get the Apollo 11 and then eventually the Eagle pod to land, that's incredible mathematics, isn't it? It blows my mind.
At one stage, the command is given, tilt the spacecraft at so many degrees and fire this rocket for a certain amount of power for so many seconds. But the calculations behind that would have been many, many days, and they would have run out of food before they'd worked out the calculations.
You would have been able to do it. I'm sure you would have been able to do it. But anything's possible. And as Dr. Karl said, you got the Wright brothers having an experimental flight in 1903, man walking on the moon, 20th of July, 1969, and that's over a relatively short period of time. On another day, not today, but on another day, let's talk about the moon landing conspiracies. But we'll do that another time.
Sure.
While we're talking about distant galaxies, because this fascinates me, a team of astronomers have detected what they call the most promising signs to date of a possible biosignature or signs of a past or present life linked to biological activity on an exoplanet named K2-18b.
The James Webb Space Telescope is so powerful that it actually can analyze the chemical composition of atmospheres from far, far away. And the atmosphere analyzed from K2-18b shows molecules that can only be produced by living organisms.
And everybody's very excited about this. Can you explain to us what K2-18b is and why people like yourself are going, ooh, ah?
Yeah, this could be the one. Announced on the 17th of April 2025, that could have been the first announcement of what might turn out to be life on another place that is in the universe that is not Earth. In this case, as well within our galaxy, it's only 124 light years away, which means that whatever's happening now that we see with our telescopes actually happened 124 years ago, because that image is carried to us only at the speed of light, not instantaneously. And what we've found is a chemical that may be the indicator of life. So let me just sort of run through that. How do they do it? So you've got this star there, which is a red dwarf, not particularly big, just a very small star, and it's not very bright. And this planet appears to be in the so-called habitable zone, where you can have liquid water. So it's not too far away, it's not too close. Just as a little aside, one problem here is that red dwarfs, unlike our star, which is a G-type star, a green star, red dwarfs tend to be unstable and have little outbursts of radiation, which maybe could destroy life on its evolutionary path, or maybe it'll help it along. So we've got this red dwarf, and going around it is this planet. So we've got this telescope staring at the sun, this red dwarf, and it's measuring a certain brightness. And then every now and then, every 32 days, the brightness dips a little bit as this planet, which is 2.6 times bigger than the Earth, goes across the face of this red dwarf. So suddenly the light level drops down, so it's not so bright anymore. Okay, that makes sense. But it has an atmosphere, and some of the light emitted by the red dwarf goes through that atmosphere. We can then analyse what chemicals are in the atmosphere. Now, do you remember in the old days there used to be red sodium lights on highways, Luke? Do you remember the red sodium lights?
You mean the cat's eyes in the middle?
No, the illuminating the road. So up above you in the sky there were these red lights, these yellow lights. They were yellow instead of white.
No.
Okay, forget that one. Secondly, do you have a gas stove?
Yes.
Okay, drop some salt in it.
Yes.
So get the flame going, it's a blue flame, and just get some little particles of salt.
Yes.
And drop them in there, and suddenly they'll light up yellow.
Okay.
Or if you've got barium, they'll light up red. And this is how they get their different colours in the fireworks. It turns out that every single element in the periodic table has its own characteristic colour. And so you can analyse the light for this colour and then see the element. Do you remember that album by Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon?
Dark Side of the Moon, the prism.
Yeah. So there's a prism, and a beam of light comes in, spreads a little bit, and then comes out the other side and then spreads more. And then you got a band maybe this big, but if you've got a proper spectroscope, you can spread that out to be a couple of metres across, and you can look across that band of colours, and you'll see these little spikes, and these spikes are indicative of certain elements.
Okay.
So, for example, helium is called helium because it was discovered in the sun, Helios, before it was discovered on Earth. We looked at the sun and we found that the light coming from the sun had these spikes in that if you ran the light through a glass prism, at one end you get these spikes, and we said we haven't seen that on Earth, and then later we discovered it associated with the gas coming out of oil wells. Okay, so what we did, we looked at this light that was travelling through the atmosphere of this giant planet, not giant, but say 2.6 times bigger than Earth, and we discovered the signatures of the chemical dimethyl sulfide, which is the smell you smell of the beach. When you go to the beach and you say, oh my God, I love the smell of the beach, it must be ozone. It's not ozone. It's dimethyl sulfide. And it's given off by creatures in the ocean, such as plankton. What they've found is a signature of dimethyl sulfide in the atmosphere of this planet. Firstly, can you get dimethyl sulfide elsewhere than life? Not on Earth. On Earth, dimethyl sulfide appears only when it's generated by creatures in the ocean. And so what the astronomers are saying is that there's a possibility that this planet has an ocean, is covered by an ocean of water with a hydrogen atmosphere for various other reasons, and that this chemical is being made by the plankton that live in the ocean. But, right, so there's a slight problem with that, in that we've looked at some comets and we've found dimethyl sulfide there, and they certainly don't have a thriving life system, but who knows how the chemical got there. But if you assume that dimethyl sulfide is made only by living creatures, then there's a good chance we've discovered life there. But then there's another problem. When you look at the actual scientific paper, there's a graph there, and they're looking in the infrared. Our eyes work from 0.4 to 0.7 of a micron. A micron is a millionth of a metre. At the blue end, we've got blue light, which is 0.4 of a micron in wavelength, and red is 0.7. And here we're in the infrared, we're up at around 7 microns. And if you look at the curve, it's kind of bumpy, and it definitely looks like the signature of dimethyl sulfide, but the error bars are fairly large. Now, let me introduce you to the concept of error bars. When a politician stands up and says that this project will cost $45 million, what I want is error bars, which is where they say this project will cost $45 million and there's a 95% confidence that the price will be somewhere between 40 and 150.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I want a 95% confidence limit. Right.
I think you're right.
And they always go over. So in this particular case here, the error bars are fairly large. And so the chances are that this is a false finding, that this is just a coincidence, 3 in 1,000. And the scientists wanted to be better than that. They wanted to be 6 out of 10 million. So it's not yet fully accepted by the scientific community as a proper finding because the error bars are still too large. And so they've got to get more readings, either with the same telescope or a different telescope, or people interpreting it again to see if we come up with greater significance. But if it does turn out that there is dimethyl sulfide in the atmosphere of that planet, there's a good chance it was manufactured by life, and this could be the first signs of life not on Earth. Not life smart enough to make TV shows like Married at First Sight, but life intelligent enough to have babies. It's a fairly low standard.
Dr Karl Kruszlenicki is with us on Bonafide with Luke Boner. Dr Karl, our ancestors have always believed that there's life out there somewhere, aliens. Some people even believe that human beings were first put here by aliens. Mm-hmm. If we do discover an intelligent life form, not just a fungus that grows at the bottom of a pond, but if we actually find intelligent life out there somewhere, how is that going to change us?
We can learn from them and they can learn from us and we can help each other along.
But if they were intelligent, wouldn't they have made themselves known to us by now? Do you think they already have? Do you think there's...
Well, go to Wikipedia and look up the Fermi paradox. So Enrico Fermi was this brilliant physicist who was involved with making the first artificial nuclear reactor on planet Earth during the Second World War underneath I think it was a basketball stadium in Chicago University. One day they're working on the atom bomb about a decade later, and they're having lunch in the cafeteria. I think it was Los Alamos, I'm not sure, but they were working on the atom bomb. And suddenly, after a break in the conversation, he just said, "Where are they?" and everybody knew what he meant. The universe is very old. If there is intelligent life elsewhere in our galaxy, which is 100,000 light years across, after, say, 100 million years, they would have reached us, if they're travelling fairly slowly,
that's what I reckon.
or a billion years. And our galaxy, the Milky Way, is 11 billion years old, and yet we have no hard proof of aliens being here. And so that's called the Fermi paradox. If there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, bearing in mind the universe is quite old, they would have had time to get here. Where are they? And if you go through the article in Wikipedia, you'll find a whole bunch of reasons, ranging from they wipe themselves out to when they get to a certain stage of knowledge and power, and their lesser sides destroy themselves with their advanced technology, all the way up to they are here and we're in a zoo and they're just making sure that nobody else pokes sticks at us through the bars of the jail that we're in. And when we advance enough with our compassion and our knowledge, we'll be admitted to the International Galactic Federation.
Okay, but what about the Roswell conspiracy? Is it a conspiracy or are they hiding something?
Okay, so go back to Roswell, and I think it was around 1954, and the finding was, by a farmer, of a whole bunch of weird materials, some mostly soft and shiny, but stuff that he'd never seen before, this farmer. And he reported it to the local newspaper, and they said UFOs found in Roswell, and then suddenly the military kicked in, and then there was a big cover-up. And then later there was a video released showing some medical doctors doing surgery or autopsies on these aliens. Okay, so does that kind of ring a bell?
It does.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. Right, okay. Firstly, at that time, just think back to the time, 1954, so it's about 8-9 years after the Second World War, and the Cold War was happening at that time. And so atom bombs were a big thing. Okay, here's the thing for you. I won't ask you a question, I'll just tell you the answer.
Yeah.
The number of air bases licensed to carry nuclear weapons in the entire known planet was 1, and that was at Roswell. Right? So, okay, so putting nuclear weapons on aeroplanes and then flying them somewhere and dropping them, you got to shrink the weapons down to get them small enough to carry, and so it was a whole big deal. And so Roswell was the only place, but at that time, the United States Air Force didn't exist. It was still part of the United States Army. And so just keep that as a background factor. Now, at that time, there was a project where they were listening for the Russians developing nuclear weapons. And when I say listening, they put microphones on high-altitude balloons going up to 100,000 feet. It was called, is it Majestic 12? I can't remember the name of it. But so what the farmer had found was the remnants of a balloon that had not managed to go to orbit properly, made of unusual materials like, alfoil and stuff like that. That's very specialised material making these high-altitude balloons. And then the conspiracy theory kicked in, and all these documents appeared with the headline of Roswell Air Force Base. And then when it was pointed out to them that the Air Force didn't exist as an entity at that time, suddenly the documents reappeared with United States Army Air Corps on them, and the Roswell Air Force Base taken off them. And then when you go back to the actual autopsy that they do on the alien, the autopsy is not done the right way. When you hold scissors, Dr. Luke, how do you hold scissors?
Were you supposed to hold them by the
thumb and the forefinger? Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about when you're running with scissors. You never run with scissors.
No. Here's the question. Yes. When you hold scissors, you normally go thumb and forefinger or like this.
Yeah.
And so with the smaller hole that the surgical scissors have, an ordinary person, a non-doctor, will pick them up and use them like that, thumb and forefinger. But a medical person who's been trained in surgery will hold them with the thumb and the middle finger. And the advantage of that is that you're working with the patient and you're going snippy, 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 and then you need to use your fingers. You take your thumb out. See, I've got my middle finger in there.
Yeah.
You take the thumb out. You swivel it around.
Yes.
You then hold it with your little finger, the scissors, under your wrist. Yes. And then you've got a bunch of fingers left where you can operate on the patient. Every medical doctor in the world who
Yes.
does surgery, and every pathologist holds the scissors with a thumb and the middle finger, but not in the video. The supposed medical doctors who did the autopsy held the scissors like a non-surgeon with the thumb and the first finger.
Ah.
And I've actually taken out an appendix, and as a medical doctor, and when you do the cut down, mate, it's nothing like the anatomy books. You just do the cut down, and then you think, there's this white membrane everywhere, there's this fascia, and you have to do what they call a blunt dissection, and you sort of push it out of the way, and you work your way down, and then finally you see something, and you say, what's that? Is that the appendix? And then the people who are looking after me, making sure I didn't do something bad, said, yeah, that's the appendix. And, mate, in the video, they sort of go, cut, oh, here's a kidney, here's a spleen, here's a, it's like they're plastic bottles. And if you do the interviews, I've seen the interviews with the people who do Hollywood special effects, and they said, yeah, that was one of ours. And you can tell from when they bend the leg, they only bend it to a certain point because then it suddenly crinkles. And they're the sort of organs that we make for horror movies.
Look, it's fascinating stuff. You were a medical doctor. You actually took out someone's appendix. You know what would impress me if you performed your own appendectomy? That would be impressive.
That's been done.
We'll save that for another day.
Once. Okay, I'll tell you. In Antarctica at the South Pole. Oh, no, a Russian doctor did to himself when his appendix went bad, and he got the techs to be his assistants, and he did it with a mirror. He took out his own appendix.
No anaesthetic.
He would have had local anaesthetic, but not general anaesthetic, because he was the only one who had the knowledge to know what to remove and how to remove it and sew it up and fix it up afterwards.
Performing your own circumcision, that'd be interesting too, wouldn't it?
I prefer to keep onto my body parts unless absolutely
Leave your body parts until it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Dr. Karl Kruszlenicki is with us. I wanted to talk to you in the future, and we're going to invite our listeners to send you some questions.
Hurrah.
Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. If you want Dr. Karl to answer a question, you got a science question, physics, in fact, anything, he will answer it for you here on the podcast in future broadcasts. I wanted to talk to you about cryogenics, and it's a dispelled myth that Walt Disney was frozen, hoping to be defrosted down the track and brought back to life. That's actually been proven as a myth. He was cremated 2 days after he died, but it was a great myth that did the rounds. But I want to ask you, not today,
okay,
but down the track, is it possible for us to be frozen and brought back to life like Harrison Ford was in Star Wars? I'll ask you that.
Right.
I want to ask you more about aliens. I want to ask you how the pyramids were built, because that still baffles people. And is there any really such thing as the Loch Ness Monster? Is there a Yeti? Are these things myths, or do you think they're out there? We'll ask those questions down the track. But we will ask our listeners to ask you questions. Luke Boner, radio guy at gmail.com. Dr. Karl, congratulations on the book. It's been out for some time now, but you've got to read it cover to cover. You are a very, very, there it is. You are a very, very interesting character, and it's an absolute pleasure to be your acquaintance and your friend. And thank you so much for joining us on Bonafide with Luke Boner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luke.
Love everything you do.
Everything you ever will do.
Next up on Bonafide on this Anzac Day, the president of Wounded Heroes, Martin Shaw. I wanted to introduce you, and for regular listeners of mine, reintroduce you to a bloke that's become a good mate. His name is Martin Shaw, and he is the president of a charity that I'm very proud to be an ambassador for. It's called Wounded Heroes. Now, I can't quite remember how Martin and I became latched to each other 5 years ago. It may well have been through a caller, because I hold Anzac Day in very, very high regard. To me, Anzac Day is the most important day on our calendar, more important to me than Australia Day, which is divisive. But Anzac Day is a day that brings the whole nation together. And it was brought to my attention that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of ex-members and current members of the Australian Defence Force who are doing it tough. They're doing it tough physically, mentally, and financially. And it would appear that one of our biggest disgraces is the way the ADF treats people who have served this country, almost obliterating them from front of mind when they've done their service. And a lot of service men and women really struggle with mental health issues. They struggle with alcohol and drug addiction. Domestic violence is a huge problem with people who just haven't been debriefed and can't cope with what they've been through. And so the purpose of Wounded Heroes was to improve the lives of those veterans, improve the lives of those ADF personnel and their families. And what they do is quite simple. They deliver, as their mission statement says, compassionate, reliable support where it's needed most. And sometimes that is just a simple act of trying to find a motel room and put a roof over someone's head when they've got nowhere to go. The amount of lives that Wounded Heroes has saved, I can't count. But suicide is a massive problem. And I mentioned domestic violence. And then I was lucky enough to track down and meet my next guest. His name is Martin Shaw. And for 13 years, he ran Wounded Heroes. He took over from another bloke, and we'll get to that in a second, but out of his own pocket, solely with the help of donations, philanthropy, and some sponsorship. And so Anzac Day is a triggering day for a lot of ADF and ex-ADF personnel. And we still are dealing with PTSD and all these social problems with Vietnam vets who have been completely discarded by the government. And that's where Wounded Heroes steps in, and I am proud to be an ambassador. And I am proud to say that there is a coffee that you can buy, and the proceeds go towards helping these people who desperately need help. Martin Shaw is with me now on Bonafide with Luke Boner. G'day, buddy.
Hey, Lukey, how are you, mate? Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. Look, it's one podcast at a time, and there's sponsorship available if people want to help me keep it going. But we do one podcast at a time, and with Anzac Day just around the corner, I had to include you in this special episode of Bonafide because these ADF veterans and their families desperately need help, and that's what you've been providing. So a rather long introduction, but I wanted to do that properly because there are plenty of people who are joining the Bonafide podcast who don't know about you. You didn't start Wounded Heroes, but you took over with no money, but just a passion to help people. Take us through the history.
So we established 2007. Our founder was a veteran by the name of Jim Shapcott. He was 2nd 14th Regiment from 1969 to 75 as a captain. Ended up running Divine Homes as a national marketing manager. In 2007, he identified a need in the defence space that wasn't being filled by the larger organisations. That was around the immediacy of veterans and families and current serving members and families that from time to time can get themselves into financial strife through no fault of their own. He was, of course, had a full-time job, as a lot of veterans do. He then approached the larger organisations and say, hey, there's a need. I think you should try and fill it. They weren't particularly keen or interested in it, so he was quite a stubborn bugger. So he said, well, bugger this, I'll do this myself. So really 2007 till I met with him up in 2011, January 2011. I liked the organisation that Jim had started because it was a national charity, not a state-based charity like the other organisations are.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to why that's important to me with no borders, if you like. And I liked the organisation because at that time, 94 cents of every public donation was going back to veterans and families, which today is 100% of public donations. You know, too often there's, particularly nowadays, Luke, I'm sure you'd agree, and your listeners would agree, there's charity blindness. You know, you've got so many charities, 60,000 charities out there. You know, who do you support?
And how many of those charities overlap and try and raise money for the same good cause?
That's right.
But 3/4 of money raised goes towards administration and wages.
Correct, and that's why I was interested in Wounded Heroes in January 2011. But look, in truth, our revenue was $50,000 a year. We had 50 people on Facebook. So when I get involved, and I'm no marketing genius, but just putting some work into the Facebook. I didn't know what a veteran really was, to be in truth. I thought if you got injured in Afghanistan or Iraq or in war, you just get $1 million from the government. Why wouldn't you? You lay down your life for our country. And I didn't realise how poorly our ADF members transitioning out of the Defence Force were treated in regards to how long it takes for them to get their claims through which they're entitled to. So it really wasn't until about 4 months after I joined the organisation and was sort of floundering around a little bit. And I did a fundraiser, Lukey, down at the Carrara markets on the Gold Coast, which is probably the worst place in Australia to actually raise money. But in the end, I went down there for 3 days, got a free stall, and I put it on Facebook. We had a veteran and his family come up to visit us from Tweed Heads. Jim, unbeknown to me, had sent down $2,000 to them to cover some expenses. They were in financial crisis. As I mentioned, I wasn't on the board. I wasn't involved with the organisation at that level, but I just thought I could help. The wife came up with a husband who was in Afghanistan. He was a battalion sergeant major in Helmore province in Afghanistan, did 3 tours. The sergeant major is critical because with the 3 tours, he was in charge of bringing all his boys home, and he did successfully, but he himself was injured with an RPG in Afghanistan, ended up in a German hospital.
An RPG?
A grenade, a rocket-propelled grenade. Was blown into a container, effectively buried alive, ended up in a German hospital. 41, young man, probably going to be the next chief of army, strapping. He ended up coming home. His wife brought him up to Carrara. He can't do crowds anymore. He had 30 milligrams of Valium. It was too noisy for him. But she made him come up to say thank you from Jim. And of course, as I mentioned, I didn't know. And they also brought their 2 children, 10 and 12, with them as well. And I learnt the story of how he was injured. And then the next breath, she then proceeds to give me a check for $1,000 and said, we didn't need $2,000. Here's $1,000 back. And I then thought to myself, who the F are these people? And what had happened, Luke, and I hope that this is not triggering for any of your listeners, but what does a 10-year-old boy do when he hasn't seen dad for 8 months? And he was named in Parliament for his injuries, etc. He jumps on the bed, dad's home, and dad nearly killed him.
Gee.
And his wife couldn't get him off because this is a built soldier. So he ended up in the mental health facility down at Tweed. His son was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, as well as his 12-year-old sister, because of his father's service. And they had an $887 medical bill at the Tweed Hospital they couldn't just jump over, and that's why they needed some help with some money. On the 25th of June 2011 changed my life, and I thought there's just no money for the families when they're in that desperate need. So I rang my 2 older children and said, Dad's not going to be a millionaire anymore. I found out what I want to do with my life, and since June 2011 I dedicated my life to trying to keep veterans alive. In my time, since 2011, I've looked after just over 33,000 now veterans and families that are facing immediate financial crisis, homelessness around Australia. We had a Lieutenant General, one of your compatriot ambassadors, our patron, Greg Bilton, and he announced in front of a very important crowd that he felt that I'd saved 32,000 lives, which I'll never be able to say myself, but you just don't know when they're out of food, out of fuel, don't have comms, can't find a place to sleep. We had 3 over the weekend that were homeless, 2 in New South Wales, 1 in southern Queensland, and they just needed a place to put their head down and have a shower and something to eat. So these are veterans that have dedicated their lives. At 18 years old, Luke, as you may or may not know, when they join the Defence Force, they have to sign their will. What other job have you do that? Because they're just laying down their lives for us. So, it's great work, important work.
Martin, the question I first asked you when you first told me these stories and your motivation was, how can the government and the ADF just forget these people?
Well, it's a complex question.
As simple as possible, though, because I just don't understand it. Is there no duty of care after you've finished your time in the army and you've seen atrocities overseas?
Well, officially there is a duty of care. The problem with veterans is twofold. And first of all, I guess it's informing your listeners, which I said recently on your other show, that the Australian Defence Force is the only organisation in Australia that doesn't have work cover.
Say that again, because I was absolutely gobsmacked when you first told me this. Say that
So
again.
the Australian Defence Force is the only organisation in Australia that does not have work cover. So when the boys were coming back from Afghanistan, these were 21 and 22-year-olds. They're all turning 32 now. And they weren't fit to go back to war. They are out. If you can't go to war, particularly in the army, you're out. So if you've got physical or mental health issues, you're basically out. So we had 22-year-olds that were basically lost their job. And all they wanted to do since 6 years old was, put a uniform on and defend our country. So that's the first thing. And I guess the second part is it's they've created themselves, the government, not the people in Department of Veteran Affairs, but the government through the different, doesn't matter if it's Labor or Liberal, through the bureaucracy of trying to actually then put systems in place under very complex legislation to be able to support the veteran. But what they didn't account for, and they have never accounted for, in my opinion, is that the government, not the bureaucrats, is to understand that there's mental health involved when they're coming home and they're not being supported around that to get their claims through. So if you and I are injured in our workplace, I can go to work cover and get 80% of my pay for a year, and it would give all those veterans that are entitled to a pension, they are entitled to a payout, a pension, depending on the severity of their injuries. But they're now waiting 3 to 5 years, Luke. 6-8 years ago, I guess the benefit of me being doing this in my 15th year now is that it used to take about 5 months. So, you go home and you say to your wife, hey, listen, I've lost my job. I'm not going to get any money for about 5 or 6 months. And then you hunker down, as you would, and say, okay, we'll make ourselves work and we'll live within our means because we know this money's coming. But now it's 3 to 5 years, and that's too much for a family. So they're going on to Centrelink, Luke. They're gone from defending ourselves in Afghanistan, deployed on operations, separation from family, and they're coming out and being on Centrelink and some on disability pension, and it's absolutely despicable. So my aim before I die is if we could get the legislation changed that they all go on work cover, it'd put me out of a job, which would be great. And in the end, we can support these guys because the biggest cause of veteran suicide, and I'm sorry to use those words on your show, is that they've lost their dignity because they can't feed their families. They give up because at the end of the day, they've as I say, they've lost their tribe, they've lost their dignity, and they don't fit anymore into the world. And then when you have money compounding, as you would know, any family listening, it doesn't have to be defence, money can cause the ultimate stress in the families. And whilst they sit there at home, medicated, substance abuse, homelessness, and all the things you can imagine around that, family dysfunction, they think themselves, well, I'm better off not being here. My wife will get my pension, kids will be okay, and I've got no more contribution to society. So, yeah, it's bad.
There is a crisis hotline, folks, 1300 532 112, and Lifeline is there, 13 11 14, 24/7 crisis hotline. 1300 532 112. The only government department that doesn't have work cover. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? I got pretty close to one of the young soldiers that you helped. He's passed away now. He died of cancer. I won't mention his name because I don't want to embarrass his wife, who's moved on. But he was a young bloke who couldn't wait to join the army. He was a crack shot. He shot rabbits in country Victoria. And you put me in touch with him and we just clicked. And when he passed away, it really affected me. And I can't, and you know this to be true. And I don't know how you cope. Who helps you when you get close to these people and eventually they leave us? What's your coping mechanism? Do you sort of just compartmentalize things, or what do you do?
It's a good question. I think that's what I do is I just compartmentalize it. It's a tough space that we're in, I guess, but it's actually, he becomes. I actually listened to a podcast he did about a month ago. Accidentally, I found it, and I think he was with the now Minister for Education, Jason Clare, or something. And there was some sort of conversation going on, and I think what he does for me is I use his energy to keep me motivated and keep me pushing through what we're doing because, he's not with us, but I feel an obligation to, support his memory. And I think about him a lot. I've got a photo of him on my wall here with a smile on him. That story there.
I'd like a copy if I could.
I've got it actually. And I've actually got a copy of which I've sent to his family. Actually, by fluke, we helped fund a trip down to his bucket list because he needed to go just before he passed away. Drove down in a Winnebago with his wife and 2 children down to see his mum in Sale to sort of say goodbye. We pulled into the War Memorial actually, and oddly enough, they went into the secret squirrel place and they actually recorded his service over in Afghanistan and what was going on over there, the different missions. And it's not that confidential, so I might get that to you. It's a bit emotional. But he was 19, so the old Red Gum
song.
And in the true fact, he was 19, and he ended up embedded with the British as a crack force before he ended over into Helmore province. And he was a bombardier. That meant he was firing bombs over the heads of the Australian soldiers and trying to clear the Taliban and protect those lives. In actual fact, he worked for, I mentioned my story about the first veteran I really helped or met down at Carrara Markets. He actually worked for him in Helmore province. That's how I found Brendan, because that sergeant major contacted me saying, listen, I got one of mine that's not too well after he got diagnosed with the testicular cancer. But here's my motivation to answer your question. And then, you got people like Jesse Bird, took his life 2007 at 17. I'm close with his mum. I'm close to a lot of the mums of the boys that took their lives. And that's my motivation to keep the wounded heroes to be able to be there. Knowing we're helping is a wonderful, as you would know, Luke, you do this all the time. It's not about taking, it's about giving, and to be able to be there and just say, for a simple, I could show you a text I got in this morning, from a guy I helped yesterday, and I just sent him $75 food. He was on his own, didn't need a lot. I just said, look, I wasn't going to be here. I couldn't feed myself and I feel like crap. And him coming back and saying, thank you, you've just changed my life for $75. I could walk between here and 200 yards away, and I get $75 off someone. That to me is, and you met Kim, my wife, and we go home at night and we go, you know what, our lives aren't too bad, And in my old days, in truth, I can tell you listeners that my best functioning was alcohol. I gave up drinking 2020. I used to use that as quite a leverage, and then I realised that was just a pathway of destruction.
So when you eventually make it to my man cave, you're not going to have a beer with me?
No, you can make me a cup of tea. I can watch you drink the beer. I could pour it for you.
Yeah, I'll drink the beer. I'll make you a cup of tea, and then chances are you'll beat me at pool.
That's the only reason I gave up drinking. So when I eventually got to your place, mate, I can probably beat you at pool.
Oh, yeah. There's a long queue. Martin Shaw is with me, the president of Wounded Heroes. It's an organisation I'm proud to be an ambassador for. They have a 24/7 crisis hotline, 1300 532 112. So Anzac Day is a really triggering day for a lot of vets.
Oh, look, in actual fact, yes, of course it is. April is the start of it. So you're always running into the triple whammy, Luke, of your school holidays. I've just come off Easter and, of course, then Anzac Day. So it's our biggest, apart from December, which has, again, the triple whammy of school holidays, Christmas, and then New Year's Eve. That's the most time that we do lose boys. So that's when our 24/7 crisis line really hits into action, because all the other organisations, particularly over the weekend, I took 17 calls in the last 4 days because everyone else is closed around that space. So it's a very, very tough time for a lot of the veterans. And I think once we can get through Anzac Day, then we take a bit of a sigh and then crack on for the rest of the year.
I think the way the Australian public treated, and the government treated, Vietnam vets when they came back from Southeast Asia was just appalling. And so many of them were recruits. Their birthdays fell on the wrong day and they lost the lottery and they were sent to Vietnam not knowing what the hell they were in for. World Wars I and II, especially, my grandfather went to Villers-Bretonneux and he thought he was going on an adventure. Had no idea what he was in for. He was a Lewis gunner. But you know what he did for a living? He was a window dresser.
Ah.
He was a window dresser at Macy's. And he'd moved to America but came back. He was frustrated that the Americans weren't getting involved in the war quick enough, came over here and enlisted. And he went over as a private and came back an acting Lance Corporal.
Oh, okay.
Because, they ran out of corporals. He was a Lewis gunner, and he was also a violinist. He played the organ, he played at St. Philip's Church at York Street there. And next thing you know, he's a Lewis gunner in France. God, I can't imagine it.
Wow.
But
Jeez.
just getting back to the Vietnam vets, because Wounded Heroes still look after Vietnam vets. How many do you reckon?
I had one on Thursday, Easter Thursday. We were guiding him around getting into aged care, 77, Luke. Between transitions, he was going to be homeless. He couldn't get any help from what would you believe, the other organisations that should be looking after Vietnam veterans at the very least. So we just put him up in 7 nights accommodation. There seems to be a change, even since I last spoke to you, around Vietnam veterans. I'm noticing, I blame you, Luke, because you create this awareness for us.
I put my hand up. What have I done?
You create this awareness for our organisation through your advocacy for our organisation. And I think we've got to reach into that community, Vietnam community, and perhaps it wasn't just the way that they were treated by the public, it was the way they were treated, which is common knowledge, and I'm not making anything up, but how they were treated by the service organisations, RSL and the like, at the time. I think there's a lot of, I'm starting to see a change where we're getting a lot of more calls from Vietnam veterans and also the partners, the wives of those guys. And I think the reason is twofold. I think one is that they've got a long, veterans like you and I have long memories. Two is on how the way they were treated. Two is that they seem to identify our organisation as grassroots, which is, part of what I'm talking about with yourself and the advocacy you've been giving us. Three is I think that the cost of living is the biggest issue for them now because they're all on fixed. They've got their payout. So if the public or your listeners listen to you now, what would happen is that they may be on a fixed income. Let's call it $1,500 a fortnight. For the rest of their lives. And that's only indexed to inflation. So where you've got cost of living where their rent may have gone up or perhaps their mortgage or just the cost of living of your various household items, as we all have to adjust. But, we had one recently where his rent went up by $60 a week. Mm-hmm. He thought he was going to be evicted the day they didn't pay his extra rent, which we paid for him. And he got knocked back by one of probably the largest RSLs up in New South Wales, and for the $60, which you'll never understand that. But by the way, I don't care, neither do you. We just why you support us is because we don't get involved in all that nonsense. We just help, and that was. But then we don't do the ongoing. So that's what your listeners should understand is that we just get them out of trouble, and then like the rest of the community, we just have to adjust. If we know that now our expenses are going up, but we're on a fixed income, you just adjust your life accordingly and helping there. So I think the three factors around just the awareness of our organisation, we're easy, we're not judgmental, and we're not talking about $60,000 or $6,000. We're talking about $60 and $100 and $150. So and that also allows us to manage our own cash flow, our own donations and philanthropy, as you mentioned.
If you can help, woundedheroes.org. And once again, that crisis number is 1300 532 112. Just looking at more recent theatres of war that we've been involved in, I'm talking Timor, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. Let's go to Afghanistan for a sec. Just in your words, describe some of the first-hand stories, or just even one of them. Give us an example of what some of these people have been through and what they're now mentally trying to cope with.
Oh, wow. The one that really sticks in my heart is Anzac Eve. I was living on the Gold Coast at the time. I had a call from Redlands RSL and saying that we've got a veteran that needs some food vouchers. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, he did 2 tours of Afghanistan. He came home. He was next to his mate where he was killed blue on blue, so he was taken out by one of the Afghani soldiers that we were training. And so he was a boy, would have been 32, I'd say, or certainly early 30s. He went into with his family into the RSL to get a food voucher because it was Anzac Eve. Yes. They said you could have one, but you have to sign up as a member first. Mm-hmm. So he told the F off and went home. Somehow the call came to me. I thought, bugger it. He was up at North Brisbane. It was about an hour and a half away. I thought, bugger this. I'm driving up. It's Anzac Eve. I got to the home. I was just on dark. They had no power, electricity on, basically in the dark. So you talk about our response and our need for cash at bank is because the only way I got those lights back on with Origin Energy was to call them and pay the account over the phone, which we did, got the lights back on. He was sitting in the corner. He wouldn't make eye contact with me.
Right.
She was in her dressing gown on the couch. he'd lost his dignity. He was asking for help, which is not what their DNA is all about. She had sold all her jewellery. They had sold furniture to get food to try and pay the bills because his claims hadn't gone through yet after a year. And he'd hocked his medals for $1,000. Incredibly to me, this is why it resonates with me so much, and I'm sure with you, is that in the back room was their 4 children, 8, twins 11 and 14. And if you can imagine sitting around a dining room table and they're poor, trying to find a way to feed, and the kids agreed to hock their PlayStation and Xbox, that really hit home to me. It wasn't that the hocking part of it, it was that you had to have those conversations with your children. You know, this is a decorated soldier, and they're now asking their children to sell things or to hock things. So, look, I fixed all those things up, and I got heavily criticised because I had a food voucher then, Lukey. I gave him $500.
Who criticised you?
Oh, the big guys, but like I don't care. The reason I got criticised is because I ordered $130 worth of pizzas. Those kids hadn't seen a pizza for 8 months, just the basic stuff. And I got a very quick glance from the soldier as if to say thank you. I didn't communicate with me because I gave him a $500 food voucher, but it was Anzac Eve, right? So by the time they had to go out, go shopping and blah, 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 it just wasn't worth it, you know. So, and look, we sorted out his claim for him pretty quickly because I did get grumpy and I did go to the secretary at the time in Department of Veteran Affairs and said, fix this or I was Anzac Eve for, I was about to say something terrible for bugger's sake. So
that's okay. Thank you. Say it, please.
So, I got a bit grumpy about that one, but that's probably that. And I guess...
how is he doing now?
He's he's got his claims through. It's not working. He's got so he'd be now 35. He'll never work again. He's got permanent incapacity through his service, but he has got his claims through, and the kids are in school. So
yes. Hang on, let's just go back. His local RSL wouldn't help him.
Oh, they would have, but they had to sign as a member, you know. So I could have walked through that whole RSL and got $50 of every person that was sitting there if I told them about his service. This isn't political for me, Luke. Obviously been around a while. I think I'm up to my 5th RSL president, New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria. I learned a long time ago, I guess, is we just don't get involved. If you're donating $10 to me and your listeners would like to donate, you just want to know that forget the politics. You just want to make sure that what we're doing with your money is that we are doing what we say we do. And if the others are going to go down that road and not do service delivery, but have all this money, that's not my problem. I think I just got to let the good Lord or the universe or the public figure out who's doing what on the ground and trying to make sure that we are honouring and respecting the donation that we're receiving, whether that's from the public or from perhaps a corporate organisation, that we are actually what we say we do. And that's been the toughest stuff for me to do. You know, we're very strict on our governance. We're very strict on how we treat not only the public's money, but the corporate money. And I think that, as I say, you know, I could have walked through that RSL and picked up $50 from every member in there at the time. But in the end, I just think that we need to focus on the veteran, and it doesn't do me any good to get into fights with the larger organisations and complain about their lack of service delivery at times.
Yeah, but these places are also very happy to take money from the poker machines.
Yes, I saw, yes.
Another story for another day.
But we do get some support from about 20 of the RSL clubs in New South Wales.
Oh,
so
good.
They do have their community grants. So once they've got to meet us and see what we're doing, we have been getting some support. It's like I'm down at Cogra RSL on Anzac Day as a VIP. And they've been supporting us pretty massively. So we've got a number of them out there supporting us. So as we get around to them and they understand what we're doing down there, and again, your fault, you know, as you've created that big awareness in New South Wales, our call rates are up to about 34%, whereas 5 years ago, before I met you, it was about 8%. So you can take your hat off that you're not only creating awareness, but you're also saving lives without being a bit soppy about how you've helped us.
Let me try and sell some coffee.
Yes.
Coffee for heroes. Take me through this.
I've been trying to get this organisation to be self-sustainable. Okay, as I mentioned,
if you catch a man to fish, he's right for one meal. If you teach a man to fish, he's right for life.
Yeah,
is that kind of?
That's exactly what it is, Luke. So I did develop a veteran centre up here in Ipswich in Queensland, which has got an op shop and a cafe, and that's now providing sufficient revenue to allow me to hire some people to give me some support, because the first 8 years I did this on my own. And also then, but what I was looking for was that, and that's contributing to about 60% of our administration costs, the op shop and the cafe. So the more funds we're getting, say, from corporate, the more funds are going back to veterans and families into our service delivery. I came across a guy called Phil DeBella. He's quite well known as DeBella Coffee. He sold that his coffee. He started it with a $5,000 loan from his father and sold it for, I think, $47 million in 2017. He does roasting now, and he's created a whole platform around coffee, a movement, if you like. And I managed to find him. Actually, my sales manager found him on LinkedIn, and we managed to dag a meeting with him. And the first thing he said to me was, "Marty, you want $100,000 off me, don't you?" I go, "Yep." He says, "Oh, you want $100,000 next year, don't you?" And I go, "Yep." He says, "How about I give you a way that you can raise that money without having to take away from the purse of my family?" And he offered me a world-renowned blend of coffee, which won a Golden Bean Award. So it's a quality coffee, not just a crappy blend I put together. We called it Coffee for Heroes. We launched it on Remembrance Day 2024 last year. We don't have a marketing budget, Lukey. So
Coffee for Heroes, folks. Wounded Heroes, Coffee for Heroes. How do we order it?
Coffeeforheroes.shop. So it's all online through Shopify account there. So coffee4heroes.shop. Oddly enough, Lukey, we've now got two other key blends, which is a Gunfire blend, which is a rum-infused coffee. And I tried to then link Gunfire to the history, because Gunfire coffee, the rum actually dates back to World War I. So it's actually the British provide the rum as a ration for when the boys were going into war in the morning, and also a ration at night if they made it through the day, if you want to call that Dutch courage or whatever, or liquid courage. So I've created an education program around that space. Recently, I launched Whiskey Bravo Zulu, which is an Irish blend coffee. Bravo Zulu is a Navy term for good job. So we're trying to create a platform to teach the Australian kids about the history of those particular terms. Recently, Phil also allowed us to go into his private collection. So believe it or not, Lukey, we've now got a bubblegum, a gingerbread blend coffee.
I saw that.
Jelly and donut, don't know about that one. I actually had a taste of the bubblegum, which sounds disgusting, but the aftertaste is good.
There's a decaffeinated one.
Decaffeinated one. So I guess coming back to the coffee, what we're being allowed to do is that all the profits, so we're the only non-profit charity that's got a coffee. So you have a lot of veteran organisations and other charities other organisations that have coffee. I recently saw one that they were donating some proceeds to Surf Lifesaving, but we're actually veteran-owned, if you like, coffee. So all those profits that we can make from the coffee will allow us to go back into our organisation. And the primary aim is I'm trying to fund the 24/7 crisis line, Lukey, because I've currently got one lady that's helping me. She came on about a month ago. I've been doing this on my own all that time. And we're dealing with 14, 15 calls a day. So I don't have anyone to cover outside 38 hours for the 7 days a week. But of course, I'm trying to find to use those funds to actually get some help for myself and get that line covered, particularly over the weekend. And of course, going back into our crisis arm. So last year we put out just over $410,000 in crisis funds around Australia, 4,226 veterans and families we helped. And that's in an immediate financial crisis. That doesn't include all the other calls that we get where we may navigate them out. So the coffee is a way to sustain this organisation so that we become a great partner for business, for corporates, because we're not relying on them. And we're also a great partner for government because we're not relying on the government to be able to fund our organisation. So, and I think that's the future for all charities in Australia, not just in our space, Lukey. I think every charity's got to find a sustainability model that they don't have to rely on government or businesses or even the public for that matter, that can then, when I say about reliance, is saying that we can't stay open unless you donate $1 to us. I think that in the end, there's a lot of, as I mentioned before, charity fatigue around that space. We've just seen a very large organisation that has an extremely high reputation that was solely reliant on government money, federal and state, that's basically closing down and waiting for the government to refund them up in North Queensland. So I think I'm right when I thought about this about 4 years ago. We just had to find a way to survive without that reliance on us. And I think with the public, that the public are going to donate their hard-earned dollar. And they want to make sure that dollar's going somewhere, right?
Yes.
As I mentioned, 60,000 charities, 59,000 are pretty good, Lukey, right? There's 1,000 that are probably rat bags, but I came across one I actually donate to with kids' brain cancer. Like, how could you not, right? But this was a mum and dad team that, they'd lost their child, and they created this small little charity up here in Queensland. And, at the end of the day, it's tough. So I think transparency, good governance. I've been here in the chair in my 15th year, so we got consistency of our board. We have good governance. We have transparency around. We can prove through our auditors that 100% of every public donation goes back to veterans and families. I think if I get the sustainability model of the coffee right and not have that reliance on big corporates, then we can get 100% of every corporate donation over the next 3 to 5 years that goes to veterans and families. And I think the combination of all those factors makes us probably that will make us the number one charity in Australia, because we're not going to rely on anybody, but we then have a service delivery.
Yes.
And if you can help me and through your listeners around the Coffee for Heroes product through our shop, coffeeforheroes.shop, if I can get that right in the next 2 years, then it will sustain our organisation beyond my lifetime. And that's probably the aim of life, is that we've got something that can be here and make sure that we're always delivering to those veteran communities and take the stress out of the day-to-day grind of trying to ask people for money.
Coffee for Heroes. And just go on and have a look at Coffee for Heroes. 4 is the number 4. And buy some coffee. And if you're a community group, get lots of it and sell it, because it goes to a very good cause. That's Martin Shaw, the president of Wounded Heroes. You've heard his story. And as I say, Anzac Day, a very triggering day for vets. 1300 532 112 is the crisis number. But please, if you can, have a look at Coffee for, that is the number 4, Coffee for Heroes. Martin, it's good to catch up.
Thanks for having me on.
Episode 12, our Anzac version of Bonafide with Luke Boner. Thank you so much for listening. Please leave us your comments. Send me an email, lukebonerradioguy@gmail.com, and post anything you want on our Facebook page, Luke Boner, That Radio Guy. You take care of yourselves, and I can't wait to talk soon.